There's a $10 trillion market operating in plain sight. You won't find it on the front page of any newspaper. It doesn't have a brand you recognize, a headquarters you can visit, or a CEO who gives interviews. Yet, it touches everything: the food you eat, the rent you pay, the water you drink, and the data you generate every second. It's not a company. It's not even an industry. It's something bigger, quieter, and far more powerful. It's the invisible empire of private capital, a machine so embedded in modern life that you don't see it anymore. You only feel it, in higher prices, in shrinking options, in the uneasy sense that no matter how hard you work, someone else owns the results. Every price increase, every market correction, every rent hike and debt bubble. It's all connected to an economic architecture that was designed, not discovered. They told you inflation was a side effect of policy mistakes, a temporary misstep caused by global instability. But what if it isn't? What if inflation, the rising cost of everything you depend on, isn't accidental at all, but engineered? Because in the invisible economy, inflation isn't a flaw. It's a feature. Let's start with what they don't tell you. Inflation doesn't happen because a few businesses get greedy. It happens because the system requires it. For the economy to grow, money has to move, even when nothing of real value changes. So when productivity stalls, the illusion of progress has to be kept alive somehow. That's where inflation comes in, a hidden tax disguised as prosperity. It's elegant in its cruelty. You feel it in the grocery store, in your electricity bill, in the rent that suddenly doubles. You're told it's the cost of living, but really, it's the cost of control. Because inflation quietly shifts wealth upward. It punishes savers and rewards borrowers. And the biggest borrower isn't you, it's governments and the corporations orbiting them. When inflation rises, the real value of their debt shrinks. They repay yesterday's trillions with tomorrow's weaker dollars. You lose twice, your savings erode, and your wages lag behind. They win twice, their debts deflate, and their assets inflate. The math is simple, the design intentional. Here's how the engineering begins. Step 1. Print money. Step 2. Flood the system. Step 3. Deny the consequences. Central banks inject liquidity, a sanitized word for debt disguised as stimulus. But the flow isn't democratic. New money enters the economy through financial institutions, hedge funds, and asset managers, the very core of private capital. By the time it reaches you, prices have already shifted upward. Your dollar buys less, and your future costs more. This isn't theory. It's the Cantillon effect, the centuries-old mechanism that ensures those closest to the source of money always benefit first. It's how the $10 trillion invisible empire sustains itself, through sequence, timing, and access. Access to money, to policymakers, to crises. The public sees chaos, inflation, layoffs, supply shortages. Inside the invisible economy, these aren't crises. They're opportunities. When prices crash, private capital buys. When debt rises, it lends. When panic spreads, it restructures. Each downturn becomes a transfer, not of wealth, but of ownership, from the public to the private. It's not conspiracy. It's choreography. And it all hides behind a curtain of complexity. Each layer of financial engineering adds distance between you and the truth. Private equity firms own the holding companies that own the management firms that own the assets. Each layer is legal, structured, and invisible. You can't fight what you can't see, and you can't regulate what doesn't appear to exist. Let's follow the trail. You pay rent. Your landlord answers to a property manager. That manager reports to a real estate trust. That trust is owned by a fund. And that fund? It's backed by capital from pension pools, insurance conglomerates, and sovereign wealth funds located halfway across the world. Your neighborhood isn't a community anymore. It's an investment product. Your healthcare provider isn't a service. It's a yield. Your grocery chain, your internet company, even your energy grid, all folded into the same portfolio logic. Not to serve, but to harvest. Not to build, but to extract. This is the $10 trillion machine at work, profit without presence, ownership without accountability. Consider land, humanity's oldest resource. Over the last 2 decades, millions of acres of farmland have quietly changed hands. Not to farmers, but to funds. Not for cultivation, but for speculation. They buy not to feed people, but to feed portfolios. Because whoever controls land controls life itself, food, water, survival. Then comes housing. Entire neighborhoods purchased by investment groups that never live there. They raise rents, shrink supply, and create permanent dependency. A generation grows up not dreaming of ownership, but of affordability. Then healthcare, where hospitals are stripped of their humanity, restructured for profit, and sold again as data-rich assets. Each sector, individually devastating. Together, a system of quiet domination. The genius of this empire isn't its secrecy. It's its structure. When everything becomes an asset, everything becomes tradable. Your rent payments are bundled into securities. Your medical debt becomes a financial product. Your attention, your location data, your very identity, priced, packaged, and sold. The invisible economy doesn't need to produce. It just needs to convert. To turn living reality into profit streams. To transform stability into scarcity. To make ownership itself obsolete, except for the few who own the system. Inflation plays the perfect cover. It creates noise. Confusion. A villain too abstract to fight. Global supply chain issues, they say. Unexpected demand. Unprecedented challenges. But notice the pattern, the same corporations reporting record profits during the very crises they claim to suffer from. Inflation becomes their alibi. The system's instability becomes its income stream. Because when you can control the price of money, the price of everything else becomes negotiable. And when governments try to fix it, they borrow more, feeding the cycle. Every relief package is more debt. Every rate hike is another redistribution. The cure becomes the poison. Governments secretly rely on inflation to survive. It's the easiest way to shrink real debt without paying it back. A 10% devaluation wipes away trillions in obligations, silently, painlessly, politically clean. So inflation is no longer a monster to fight, but a machine to steer. A tool to manage perception and maintain control. An illusion of prosperity that keeps the wheels turning, as long as no one looks too closely. And who steers that machine? Central banks, unelected, unaccountable, and indistinguishable from the financial empires they're meant to regulate. They raise rates, they lower rates, they justify every swing as stability management. But no matter which direction the wheel turns, the winners remain the same. Because volatility itself is profitable, and you are the buffer that absorbs its shocks. This system reshapes not just economies, but behavior. When saving becomes pointless, people spend. When ownership becomes impossible, they rent. When everything costs more tomorrow, desperation feels rational. This is psychological conditioning disguised as market dynamics. It trains society to live in constant pursuit of stability, of affordability, of security, all while the goalposts keep moving. Each generation forgets what cheap used to mean. Each crisis resets the baseline. Each recovery feels like progress, even when it only restores what was taken. That's not economics. That's memory manipulation. And yet, the story is told differently. You're told it's just capitalism. Just supply and demand. Just the way things are. But when $10 trillion move without oversight, when ownership is invisible, and when governments quietly depend on the very instability they claim to fix, that's not a market. That's an empire. An empire that doesn't conquer by war, but by ownership. No tanks. No armies. Just signatures and silence. Your home. Your health. Your data. Your future. Each piece absorbed, monetized, repackaged. Not through violence, but through valuation. The media doesn't talk about it, because the same investors who own the assets also fund the networks, buy the ad space, and shape the narratives. They own the platforms that define what's normal, and the politicians who promise to protect you from it. They sponsor the economists who explain away your struggle as a natural correction. And in doing so, they write the story of your dependence. The invisible economy doesn't need secrecy. It only needs distraction. As long as you chase the next paycheck, the next loan, the next upgrade, you won't question who profits from the cycle itself. Inflation isn't the fire. It's the fuel. And the $10 trillion market built around it is the engine. Together, they create a reality where control looks like choice, where ownership looks like access, and where freedom is just another subscription. This is the architecture of modern power, silent, calculated, and deeply personal. It doesn't ask for loyalty. It doesn't need belief. It just needs time. Because every transaction, every data point, every cost of living adjustment pushes the machine one step closer to permanence. So next time someone says, everything's getting too expensive, remember, it's not just inflation. It's acquisition. The quiet conversion of reality into revenue. A slow-motion takeover disguised as progress. And as long as you keep running to catch up, you'll never notice who's holding the stopwatch. The invisible economy doesn't rule by force. It rules by fatigue. By complexity. By design. Because the greatest trick of the $10 trillion empire wasn't hiding itself from you. It was convincing you it doesn't exist.